Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. The elites are definitely pushing bisexuality in the movies and TV shows that they create. See, originally they pushed bisexuality as an in to get people more tolerant of homosexuality. First they started pushing attractive lipstick lesbians. This was quite a few years ago, and that was all that they pushed. Then surprise, surprise, men fell for it. Men got interested in lesbian porn and whatnot, threesomes, all that shit. And then they started getting people gay tolerant. Tolerant of effeminate gay men. And now they're back to pushing bisexuality, but not because they're trying to use it as a halfway point to tolerance of homosexuality in general, at least not in the way they did before. They're not using it to get people to they're now using it to get people to believe in sexual fluidity, which is so ironic because that's the exact opposite of what they were saying way back 20 years ago. They're saying, it's not a choice, you don't choose to be gay. And now they're saying, sexuality is fluid, it's no big deal, gay, straight, who cares, it's all just a spectrum. Which is basically the same as saying that you do have a choice, right? It's crazy. But yet, what I wanted to say, though, is that they're pushing female bisexuality now. But I think this is both to push the whole sexuality is fluid thing. They're pushing female bisexuality now, but it's to push the whole sexuality is fluid thing, which is also why they're now pushing male bisexuality as well, which is something that they've never pushed before in the media. They're just starting to do that recently, maybe in the last year or two, maybe the last 3 years. Pretty recently, they only started doing this recently. And so this is obviously to get men more effeminate, more open to the idea of experimenting with homosexuality, etc. And this is to destroy masculinity, or at least destroy traditional masculinity, which really is real masculinity. But the thing is, masculinity like that, strong, defiant, I don't give a fuck, I'm going to go against these people, I don't care what it does to me, I'm going to do the right thing for the right reason, no matter what the cost, damn the consequences. Like that kind of attitude, that masculinity, that is a very masculine attitude. That is real masculinity. Women don't do that. Women are not that way. So they want to destroy that attitude in men. But the thing is, they pretty much basically largely already destroyed it. Not totally, but largely they've already destroyed it. Maybe not in like what people say, what guys say, but they've destroyed it in what guys do. I mean, look at MGTOWs and incels. I mean, Jesus Christ. You'd think they'd be overthrowing the government, or at least advocating for it, but how many of them are actually even bothering to advocate for the overthrow of government? I mean, hardly any of them. I mean, just from their own selfish self-interest viewpoint, I would think that they would be advocating for the overthrow of government. I advocate for the overthrow of government because it's the only sane thing to do, because quite apart from the incel issue, the government needs to be overthrown. It's way too tyrannical. Government itself is inherently illegitimate, etc. But just from a selfish, myopic perspective, I don't understand how the incels don't see that overthrowing the government is their only option. I don't understand how they don't advocate for it. Hardly any of them advocate for it. And how many of them are willing to go on a killing spree, or kill a family court judge, or kill a cheating ex-wife? Almost none of them, right? It's insane. It's totally insane. So yeah, basically traditional masculine male defiance has already been stamped out of men in terms of men's behavior, and largely out of their words as well. They're not even willing to advocate for the overthrow of government. They're not even willing to say it publicly. That's crazy. I mean, how hard is it to say that the government needs to be overthrown? And yet people won't even say it. Even though it's the most obvious thing in the world. I'm like the only one who harps on overthrowing the government. It's crazy. Even most anarcho-capitalists don't have the balls to say, let's overthrow the government. They just say that, government is inherently illegitimate, we don't need government, okay. But how are we going to get rid of government? Give me some solutions for how we can get rid of government. Either you violently overthrow the government, or you walk away from it, and you form communes, or you get everybody to live in the same state and declare themselves a new country, an ANCAP country, whatever. You need solutions. Not so much of this anarcho-capitalism promotion, which is good, but is probably insufficient. Especially since tyranny is advancing very quickly, both politically and technologically. I wonder if this whole turning men more feminine by getting men into experimenting with bisexuality, experimenting with homosexuality, I wonder if this will backfire on the elites, though. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying we should embrace it. I'm just saying, I wonder if it succeeds, if it won't end up actually backfiring on the elites. One of the reasons they promote female bisexuality is because it lowers male SMV and raises female SMV. As I've said before, women will go bisexual in much greater numbers as a response to MGTOW, but I really think they'll just become more polygamous more often. I think they'll become polygamous more often, women will, as a response to MGTOW, instead of caving. but they'll also become bisexual in much greater numbers as also, rather than cave to men. So, yeah, if the elites can get all women to become bisexual, then this means that even if all men go MGTOW, there's no coercive effect because women can just date other women, you see? So the elites are trying to, undermine MGTOW, undermine male power, lower male SMV even further by getting women to be far more bisexual, to the point where eventually every single woman is either bisexual or is open to experimenting with bisexuality. And then once she gets into a relationship with a woman and falls in love with her and is having sex with her, now she is bisexual. Maybe she's only done it with this one girl, and maybe that relationship doesn't last, but then she's always open to it after that, especially even more open to it than she was before, right? Like, if the right woman came along, she'd stop dating guys again and start dating a woman again. So that's what that's for. And as far as, male bisexuality propaganda, trying to get all men to become bisexual, they want men to become effeminate, weak, nonviolent, unprincipled, submissive, etc., like women. And you can do this to guys. You can make them psychologically into women through the means of homosexual sex. So this is what their aim is, to invert, to totally reverse the psychological profile of men, which is entirely possible. It's horrifying, but it is possible. It's not even all that hard to do. Well, maybe it's hard, but it's definitely possible. But also, I wanted to say that I think this may very well backfire on the elites, because when all men become bisexual or gay, then men's psychology is going to change into being more like that of women, and then men will become very subversive, like women. Men are already becoming kind of this way. I mean, like, when people see something offensive or whatever, what do? Do they go talk to the person? No, they pull out their camera. They pull out their smartphone and start recording. When there's some kind of injustice happening or a fight happening or whatever, what do? Do they try to stop it? Do they try to be a peacemaker? Do they try to join the side of the victim? Do they get involved and try to make things better in some way? No, they don't. They pull out their smartphone and they start recording. This is a very female thing. This is warfare by way of propaganda. You know what I mean? It's entirely appalling, but on the other hand, if all guys become bisexual in 50 years or 30 years, then it's like all guys will be having this very subversive attitude, the very subversive attitude the women have. And they'll pretend to be agreeable, and they'll just instantly cave when being pressured. But at the same time, they'll continue being subversive behind the scenes. They'll continue wreaking havoc in little ways. And this will perhaps be quite useful because overt defiance is easy to identify and easy to put down. But subversion, like the CIA's sabotage manual, this kind of thing is not as easy to stop or identify. And MGTOW is another example of subversion. Things like this are harder to stamp out because people are doing it. They're not marching on Washington, D.C., they're just not helping women anymore, Or they're just not recycling anymore, or they're just buying silver, or they're just buying Bitcoin, or they're just making fun of liberals with memes. And then all the subversiveness that eventually accumulates, and then the whole edifice of society crumbles, and society is destroyed by the cumulative effects of all the various ways of subversion being practiced by the bottom 99% of people. You can force them to obey you, but you cannot easily get them to cooperate with you at all. They won't participate in helping you enslave them at all. Like when people are arrested, they let themselves put the handcuffs on them, but they also walk with the police. Like, what if every time someone was arrested, they refused to walk and they just made the cops carry them? You know what I mean? What if they just laid there like a limp blob and made the cops carry them and made the cops maneuver them into the back seat like a heavy doll whose limbs don't cooperate at all? While at the same time, the arrested person offers no active resistance. It would take 100 times longer to carry the person into the cop car and then push them into the back seat to make sure their limbs are not sticking out so that the door could be closed. It would take forever. Same thing with prison. If everyone scrunched up their face for the picture taken of them when arrested and refused to walk to their cell but forced the prison guards to carry him to his cell, if everyone did that, it would become impossible to run the prison. Imagine if all the prisoners in the whole prison refused to move, right? Like when they did like some kind of check or something on the prisoners, and they made them like get out of their cell or whatever for a head count, assuming they did it that way, right? Like it would, and they instead refused to get out of their cell. Like every single prisoner refused to get out of his cell. He just laid in his cot, or he put the blanket over him. So every single prison guard had to go into the cell and pull the blanket off to see if he's actually in there. Like, what if they had to do that? Imagine how much time and money that would cost the prison. Imagine. It would just utterly bankrupt the prison. For real, all you have to do is like weak, passive little subversion like this. Refuse to let them take a good photo of you. Refuse to let them take your fingerprints. Just keep your fingers clenched. Refuse to walk out of your cell when you're in prison. Refuse to walk with them when they arrest you in the first place. Make them carry you and then shove you in the car and then push your legs in and then keep them pushed in with a stick while they're closing the door. You know what I mean? Like, just make it absolutely a pain in the ass for them to do the slightest little thing to you. Don't cooperate even in the tiniest little way. Resist everything, every tiny little step of the way. And then it would make it impossible for them to arrest you for bullshit reasons. Because it would take too much time to put anybody in the cop car and process them and all that. It would take so much time and effort and money. It would take 10 times, 20 times as much money and time and effort. And then other crimes would be being committed while the cops are taking 10 or 20 times longer to put this person in the car and get them processed and all that. And then other people are out there committing crimes that are real crimes that they should be arresting them for. If everybody did this, it would be the case of like they would no longer arrest people for bullshit anymore. It would just be too expensive in time, costing in time and money and everything. They'd just wait until people committed a real crime, like a hardcore theft or a beating or a murder or a rape or something. Then they'd arrest the person. But anybody who's doing little crimes and stuff, they won't give a shit. The cops won't. If everybody did this. You see, so all we have to do is just resist like this. You don't have to try to kill the cops to resist. You just have to refuse to cooperate with them in even the slightest little way, This is all we have to do. This is all we have to do. For real. But, obviously that would imply, waking... But, you don't even have to do it in the whole country to make it work. Like maybe a Revolutionary War, you need, a few million or tens of millions of people. No. All you have to do is get all the people who believe in this principle to live in the same area, in the same city or the same few cities all near each other. And then... once they're all congregated there and there's pretty much nobody there who doesn't believe in that principle, then everybody there does it. And then even if there still are cops, the cops will just leave everybody alone because they'll know that everybody resists against the cops. Imagine if the cops, whenever they tried to arrest anybody, 50 or 100 people automatically swarmed around the cops and said, you better let that person go. We're all armed and we're going to fucking shoot you to death if you don't let that person go. He committed a so-called crime that we don't believe in. We have our own laws here. You better, get the fuck out of here. Imagine if the cops are surrounded by 50 armed citizens whenever they try to arrest someone for, beating their wife or whatever. The cops wouldn't be able to do it. They'd have to walk away. All we have to do is get all the same people who believe in this, all the people who believe in the same thing in the same area and drive out all the people who don't believe in that. That's all we have to do. We don't even have to be the same race, the same religion. We don't even have to be really the same political affiliation, really. We just have to all believe in freedom, like get all the ANCAPs and libertarians, together, whether they're white or black or whatever. It doesn't matter. Just get them all in the same area and then just have them all be super, super devoted to getting rid of the cops, or if not completely getting rid of them, then at least threatening the cops whenever they arrest anybody for anything that's petty at all. Unless the cops are arresting someone in the act of raping or murdering or thieving, stealing someone's television or something, unless they're arresting someone for a clear, obvious, hardcore crime like that, everybody's swarming on the cops and making them let the person go. You know what I mean? If we did that, the cops would not be able to enforce any of the tyrannical laws, and then everyone would be free again, right? Cops would stop arresting people for victimless crimes like prostitution and smoking pot. If everyone in prison refused to work and just sat down instead, then the prison could not be profitable, and private prisons would all fail, and then all the prisons would become state-run again, and then the government would have to spend way more money on prisons and on housing prisoners, and then the government would stop prosecuting victimless crimes because it would be too expensive to house that many prisoners, or any prisoners, once convicted. The government would only be able to afford to imprison people who truly deserved it, rapists and murderers and thieves, right? If people force the government to micromanage everybody, then the government has to fail. The government doesn't have the time. It'd be like a planned economy. It would not work at all. Not to imply that we don't already have a planned economy, but it'd be even more planned, and thus it would be even more terrible, inefficient and stuff, right? If people just refuse to help, not even disobey, just refuse to help, refuse to participate, just did the bare minimum, and were as lazy as possible, or were as uncooperative as possible, or pretended to be as stupid as possible, fucking everything up. If everybody was doing that, the country could not function. So I really wonder if this whole promoting men to be feminine and bisexual thing will not actually backfire on the elites, because it would almost be like teaching guys better how to fight the elites. That is, fight them the way that women fight them. Not because you have to get involved with bisexuality to fight the elites that way, but, I just wonder if this whole thing, even if they're successful at turning all guys bisexual, or most guys, I wonder if this will still backfire on the elites. It may very well do so. Hopefully it will, if they succeed at it. Hopefully they don't succeed, but if they do, hopefully it fails and hopefully it backfires, and It makes it so that men start being super subversive, and this totally destroys the government, or at least destroys any ability of the government to enforce any kind of tyrannical laws at all. Hopefully they don't succeed at turning all men bisexual, but if they do succeed, I hope it backfires on them. This has been Redshift, peace trucks for promiscuous men, arrogant men, elitist men, callous men, vicious men, politicians, etc.